Welcome back. Opposition parties have called the budget lackluster, uninspiring and directionless. On the other hand, some opposition leaders have criticized the decision to increase taxes on petrol and diesel as well as gold, saying this could hurt the aadmi. The budget was big as well on political messaging, with the government's commitment to large welfare schemes being reiterated. Discussing the political ramifications of Budget 2019 now are Jayant Sinha, BJP MP from Hazaribag and of course former Union Minister, as well as Milind Deora, Mumbai Congress Chief and former Union Minister. Welcome to both of you and thank you for speaking today on the India development debate. I'm going to ask Mr. Sinha to respond first to the criticism, some of it which has come from opposition parties, but honestly also from corporate leaders and from other economy watchers who say this was a wasted opportunity. You have a massive mandate, no real opposition in sight. This opportunity could have been used for big bang transformational reforms, Mr. Sinha.
This is a very bold, forward-looking budget that positions India very well for the 21st century. There are a number of very important and significant steps that have been undertaken in this budget. The very fact that we are promising that every household is going to get water is in itself a very major announcement, and absolutely at the same level as the announcement that we made, that we said that we are going to make India open defecation free. So jo Swachh Bharat Abhiyan was a groundbreaking project. The fact that we are going to get water to every household is a groundbreaking project. We've also said that every household in India is going to have a Pakka house. That is a very bold and important announcement. The financial sector has been addressed very comprehensively. We are going to be providing 70,000 crores for the recapitalization of the public sector banks. There's going to be a 1 lakh crore credit guarantee scheme that's going to be created for the NBFCs. NBFCs are going to be regulated by the RBI better. NHB is going to be brought within the RBI. These are very important steps that we are taking for the financial sector. The impetus that we are providing for electric vehicles, the impetus for affordable housing, these are big headlines. These are very, very profoundly important steps. And then I would like to draw your attention, and I think there's not been enough discussion about this, which is the National Research Foundation. If we have to prepare India for the 21st century, if we have to have India be a leader in artificial intelligence, in robotics, in gene editing, in all of these new and advanced technologies, we have to bring our research together. We have to really ensure that our technology institutions, and I'm from IIT Delhi myself, if we have to make IIT Delhi and IIT Bombay and the Indian Institute of Science, really top-class research institutions, we have to prepare them for the future by streamlining all of this research. And all of this is laid out in the budget, and even while we're doing this, we have also made sure that the fiscal math adds up, that fiscally we do all of the responsible things that are required so that the fiscal deficit stays at 3.3%, interest rates remain moderate and soft, and we have undertaken those as well. And finally, I also want to draw your attention, Tamanna, to something that's very important for the capital markets, which is a statement that we're going to explore a sovereign bond and try and benchmark India's government borrowing to this sovereign bond, which has been something that has been a demand from industry and from the capital markets for many, many years. We have taken that step as well. So this is a budget that is comprehensive, it's forward-looking, and it has to be looked as a complement to the interim budget that also had a number of very major steps. Okay. When you look at them in totality, you will see that we continue to take forward the unprecedented pace of reforms that we have followed over the last few years.
Okay, I'll take off from that point. That's an important one. And Milind, welcome to the show. The criticism, is it fair considering this is coming after the interim budget, which had its own slew of a fair amount of announcements? So in a sense, this is kind of like a supplementary budget, which is stating the vision of this government over the next 5 years.
So firstly, you've organized a face-off between Jayant and me, and we are good friends, by the way. And I'd like to sort of elevate this discussion to beyond BJP versus Congress, party in power versus party in the opposition, and talk about substantive steps that the government could have taken and should take beyond even this budget. My own view of it is that it was a maiden attempt by Nirmala Sitharaman. It was a good budget in terms of optics. I think she addressed several points. She ticked all the boxes in that sense, if you will. But the fact remains that today there are many pain points in our economy. The fact is that unemployment is extremely high. The investment cycle needs to be kick-started. Although credit offtake has increased, which means banks are lending more money than they were last year. If you look at an indicator like factory output, that's actually decreased and regressed from last year. What that could mean, for instance, is that people are borrowing money, but maybe there's a lag time in actually deploying that money, or some of the projects are not getting cleared as quickly as they should. But essentially what it comes down to is that the investment cycle hasn't been kick-started yet. Now, if the investment cycle doesn't get kick-started, you don't create employment. If you don't create employment, people don't, consumer spending decreases, consumption isn't boosted, people don't have disposable incomes, people don't pay as much tax, the government doesn't earn as much tax, and therefore the government doesn't have enough to pump back into the economy in terms of investing in infrastructure projects as well as in social sector programs. So in terms of a direction, where I think the criticism is fair from many people, including corporate leaders, the interim budget is very different from, which was like a vote on account as compared to a full-fledged budget presented today. This budget is after this government and the Prime Minister won yet another historic mandate. And I truly believe that in 2014, when this government was the first government after 30 years to have received a majority government, to have formed a majority government, received such a massive and impressive mandate, and then 5 years later to have topped that mandate, I think bold ideas that are needed for this government, for this country to kickstart the investment cycle was certainly missing. In the economic survey, for instance, they talked about nudge theory economics, essentially for good, honest taxpayers who pay a lot of tax, contribute to the exchequer. Maybe roads should be named after them, they should get free entry into tolls. But let me ask a fundamental question. Today, for an honest taxpayer who's willing to pay tax, today they've increased tax on the rich, which I welcome completely. Where is that taxpayer money going? Today, the government, after 5 years, continues to squander away taxpayer money on unprofitable, inefficient, poorly run B2C companies like Air India. In this budget, they were pushed to a corner, they were forced to increase FDI in aviation, they were forced to talk about disinvestment, but are they really keen on disinvesting unprofitable B2C PSUs?
Okay,
in the last 5 years, the only way they've met their disinvestment targets is by selling a stake in HPCL, which is a public sector undertaking, to ONGC, which is another public sector undertaking, by selling a stake in rural electrification company to Power Finance Corporation.
Okay.
Jayant is a smart man. He and I both know that taking money out of one pocket and putting it in the other pocket does not equal disinvestment.
No,
and in fact, I would urge the government
yes,
to go back to the heydays of Vajpayee ji, to go back to the heydays of Yashwant Sinha ji, when the government continued the reform process that was initiated by Narasimha Rao, which Dr. Manmohan Singh took forward for 10 years. Obviously, our government had a lot of political limitations.
Okay, no, let me,
we were a coalition government. In UPA 1, we had 60 MPs from the left supporting us. In spite of that, we achieved a great deal of success.
Okay,
and in that sense, I think, Tamanna, I expected much more from Modi to Sarkar 2.0.
Okay, let me get Mr. Sinha to respond to that, and I know these are deep, complex issues, but I just request that both of you keep your points a little briefer so we can get more points in. I'm tempted to ask you, Mr. Sinha, because you know the difficulties in the aviation ministry, and Air India, we will sell Air India has been reiterated once more. No one wants to even buy jet. The aviation industry is truly in the doldrums. How realistic was that? And of course, I'm sure you want to respond to some of the points that Milind has made.
Well, first of all, the aviation industry is doing extremely well. Of course, in every industry, there are stronger players and not so strong players. The stronger players in the aviation industry are doing exceedingly well. Their market capitalization has gone up dramatically, and I dare say, I haven't actually done this analysis myself, that if you look at the total market cap in the aviation industry now, that is airlines only, and compare it to a year or two ago, you'll probably find that the total market cap of airlines has actually gone up. And that is because the stronger competitors are doing extremely well, and those that are not so strong are finding it difficult. as far as Air India is concerned, we made a very honest and a very balanced attempt to do a strategic disinvestment in our previous government. And unfortunately, because of external conditions, the rupee being weaker, interest rates going up, oil prices going up, we didn't find any buyers for that. And so we have to once again attempt it, hopefully with better, more benign external conditions. We have reiterated, the Honorable Prime Minister, the Honorable Finance Minister have said that we will try and make this particular disinvestment process for Air India even more attractive to potential buyers, and then go through the process. So every time we do strategic disinvestment, we have to consider, are there buyers or not? I was in the aviation ministry when we tried to do a strategic disinvestment for Pawan Hans, which is a relatively small helicopter company. Again, we didn't find any buyers. So the challenge in strategic disinvestment is, how do you find a sufficient number of buyers so that there's a liquid market for these assets? If that doesn't happen, then it's not possible to do a strategic disinvestment, no matter what the opposition says. So we have to be practical, and we have to look at what's possible, what's not possible. And in that sense, what we've been able to achieve through the disinvestment process, through the ETFs and so on, has been actually quite practical and quite successful. Obviously, if we can do more, we will want to do more. But that, again, as I said, depends on market conditions, it depends on which buyers emerge, and so on. Now, let me step back, and again, I want to thank Milind for lifting this discussion up to a higher level. And that is really about, are we doing as much as possible for structural reforms, for really propelling this economy forward? And it's not, a political matter of whether, we think one way and the UPA thinks another way. The question all of us as citizens should ask is, are we doing enough for the economy? And what I want to point out is that what we have done in the last 5 years and what we are continuing to do with this budget is just such a fundamental transformation of the economy that in effect people are finding it somewhat difficult to keep up. GST was put in place, the Insolvency Bankruptcy Code was put in place, the Monetary Policy Committee was done. All of these are very fundamental reforms. And what we're trying to do with water is again a very fundamental structural reform. What we're trying to do with the National Research Foundation, with startups, again these are profoundly important reforms. So are we doing enough to position India for the 21st century?
Mr. Sinha, I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm sorry to interrupt. Mr. Sinha, I'm sorry to interrupt.
That we have, given the challenges we have.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I mean, I'm tempted to, because I know we have limited time, and I just want to get this one question in. There are long-term plans, there are fundamental changes which are being set, and for the EV space, for startups, etc. The question is about the timing. The interim budget was at a very different time. It was pre-election. You've won a fantastic mandate, and now the economy is in pain. Right now, did it need a long-term therapy and a plan, or did it need some kind of immediate help, and was that help forthcoming?
Tamanna, we have jump-started the investment cycle. It's going to start taking effect tomorrow. And the reason for that is, we, as I have said, recapitalize the public sector banks with 70,000 crores, so they can immediately start lending. We've provided a backstop for the NBFCs, so they can start lending. We have unleashed through extra support to the corporate sector, the 400 crores in revenue turnover, 25% corporate tax. We've given them a tax cut. So there are a number of things that we have done that impact the economy tomorrow morning. And so in that sense, the jumpstart, the unleashing of the investment cycle has already begun.
Okay, Milind, you want to come in on that point, because you also brought up the point about the current pain in the economy. They have done enough to push forward for now. That's what Mr. Sinha says.
No, as I said, I tweeted about it right after the budget, that there are some positives as well. I think for instance, the 2% tax on cash withdrawals over 1 crore of rupees is something which actually, when Mr. Chidambaram was finance minister, he had initiated, which was the first step that any government had initiated to actually curb black money or disincentivize the use of cash and move people towards digitization. Unfortunately, the government took a very drastic step called demonetization a few years ago, which caused pain. I do welcome also the fact that this government has taken note of the problem with NBFCs. with the banking sector, has allocated funds to recapitalize the banks, which in turn will lend to NBFCs, which in turn will lend to, people will give loans against properties to students, to other people, which will obviously boost consumption and revive the economy. But I think there are other fundamental questions as well. And I think that is something which this government has to address. For instance, today I can tell you from a more practical point of view, if you talk to entrepreneurs, industrialists, business people, now startups is one space. Jayant and I both know, and Jayant knows this better than I do as a former venture capitalist, that the startup ecosystem still depends largely on equity capital, wherein there's no real risk to an Indian entity. It's essentially, maybe if it's foreign equity, then it's like a SoftBank or somebody else who's taking a risk on that particular sector, on that particular company, that particular entrepreneur, and on India. And if all goes south, that foreign investor loses money. But large industries, large companies in many sectors, commodity sector, the infrastructure space, many of whom are under a lot of stress, acute stress, have a lot of debt accumulated. Today, new promoters who want to set up large projects which actually employ thousands and thousands of people, more than equity funded startups do, are averse to taking loans because they're afraid that if that business fails, they will be branded crooks, crony capitalists, willful defaulters. The banks and the lenders are afraid to lend. This is a reality, and I can tell you this as someone who lives in Mumbai, who's very plugged into the financial system. I meet bankers, I meet promoters, entrepreneurs. This is a reality. And I'm not saying this is only the government's job. I'm not saying it's only Jayant's party's job or the finance minister's job. I'm saying perhaps we as a society collectively, including the opposition, and I said that earlier as well, that all political parties have to dial down and lower the volume of their anti-business rhetoric. And if we really want to kickstart the economic engine, because I think enough of politics has been done in the last 10 years, when the BJP was in opposition and we were in power, when we were in the opposition and they're in power. And I think now we as a country have to realize, regardless of party A or B, that there is serious pain in the economy and there is massive unemployment, and the government is unable to raise resources to spend on the social sector. And until businessmen come out, start borrowing money, deploying capital, hiring people, you will have a serious problem in the economy.
No, so Milind, I'm glad to hear you say that, enough of vilifying, big business. But today you're speaking as to very seasoned politicians, but also people who understand the economy. When you go back to the hustings, it's going to be a different tune. Mr. Sinha, is there a lot of focus in this budget also on that political messaging? We've been speaking to people through the day. Things like the super rich tax. You're not going to get too much out of it, but it's a messaging. The reiterations of social welfare schemes also important. But do you think that Soot Boot Ki Sarkar Bab in term 1 has stuck, and there is still wariness of being painted as a pro-business government?
It's somewhat ironic that my good friend Milind is talking about business and supporting business when his former president was the one who coined the Soot Boot Ki Sarkar and used words during the election campaign that I found objectionable with respect to crony capitalism and so on. So, but leaving that political rhetoric aside, the reality is, and this is exactly what the Honorable Finance Minister said in her budget today, and the Honorable Prime Minister has said, that it is not government's job to be in business. In fact, it's businesses, it's enterprises that are the job creators and the wealth creators. The Honorable Finance Minister said it very clearly, and that is philosophically exactly where our party is. We have to really enable our enterprises to flourish, to be globally competitive, to be innovation driven. And the good news, Tamanna, is that is happening. If you look at Oyo Rooms, you look at Swiggy, you look at Zomato, you look at Ola, you look at our homegrown innovation driven companies, they're doing exceedingly well. They're exporting from India. Now, obviously, if you were playing a different game, if you were defaulting on your loans, or you were not paying your taxes fairly, or you were over invoicing equipment, all of the things that were happening sadly consistently in the past, you are going to find it difficult to get loans now. You're going to find it difficult to find equity investors, and that is a challenge that people who practiced the old crony form of capitalism are going through right now. But everywhere across the world, debt is debt. It's not something that you can just forget about and not pay your interest payments and escape, the punishment that goes along with that. Now, through the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code, we made it very clear: if you default, you are a defaulter, and you are branded as an NPA, and your credit is very difficult to then get more loans. So this is the way it works around the world. This is how it's working in India, and those companies that are investable, those companies that are able to raise equity and financing are finding it very difficult, very easy, to get financing, because there's plenty of capital in the world. Those that are not competitive, not innovation driven, are not generating robust cash flows, are finding it very difficult. And that's exactly how creative destruction works. That's exactly how our economy has to move forward.
Okay, I have very little time left, but so I'm going to request Milind to keep his answer a little short. Milind, I'm going to ask you a broader question about the opposition's role. And I know you wanted to speak, beyond BJP and Congress, but this one is important. Over the last couple of months since the elections, we've seen a lot of economic data come in. The biggest pain points for the government have been on the economic side, and the opposition has really been silent. Is that going to continue, and do you think that's healthy for a democracy, with the opposition taking so much time just to figure out how they can regroup instead of adding the pressure and the positive pressure that an opposition party should on a government's policies?
Look, an election has just taken place. This government has won again a very impressive mandate. I think it's but natural and but civil for any opposition in any democracy to show some respect, to give them time to present their economic agenda. But in time, of course, if what they've spoken about, what was presented and announced today does not become reality, you will see the opposition get aggressive. My limited point is, look, I was a minister in UPA too, and I saw how aggressive, how conspiratorial the BJP was as an opposition, with scandals like 2G, which were later dismissed by the court, on many issues. In some ways, the political rhetoric even of the BJP as an opposition party caused a lot of harm to the telecom sector, one can argue, indirectly also to the NPA problem that we have in our banking sector. So the opposition will oppose, the opposition will question the government, regardless of which party is in power and which party is in the opposition. That's the way our democracy and any democracy around the world is structured. My limited point is that this government has won an impressive mandate. It's won its second term in office with an absolute majority, with a handsomer majority. I believe that they should have really gone beyond what the opposition may think about us, what society may think about us. Will we be seen as or perceived to be A or B or C?
I don't know.
And done what is right for the economy.
Okay,
that's where I'm a little disappointed with today's budget.
I've really run out of time, and I want to thank the both of you for this delightful conversation. I hope both of you enjoyed it as well. Completely civil, elevated and pointed. Thank you so much. With that, we're going to wrap this mega budget coverage, but before that I have to leave you with the pictures of how it all started this morning, and these fantastic pictures of the Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman moving to present the budget, not with a briefcase which some said was a colonial hangover, but with a very Indian bahi khata, which then one opposition leader said should be replaced with an iPad. Well, it's what's inside that actually matters. Like we say here in news, content is king. So was the content good enough? Did the finance minister deliver? As always, we leave it to you to decide. Thank you for joining us today.